happy for him to be in the game.
Have you ever, so when's the last time you had somebody that was so far behind retirement-wise that you almost had to say no? Does that ever happen?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Do you say no?
I say we need to figure out what we're going to do with your financial plan. Like basically in a kind
Is
way.
that code word for like, listen, sit down, we need to talk?
Well, yeah. I mean, ultimately, is sometimes what ends up happening though is people actually. I mean, there are the rare circumstances where I'm like, either you're going to have to work longer or you're going to have to spend less in retirement. Period. That's cut and dry. But there's the other ones where people just seem to go in and want to play with nest egg and they change a couple numbers and I'm like, we need to talk. I had one of those last week. They just added in some things that were already getting accounted for in the plan, and I was about to say, hey, ship has been, our train has been derailed.
Wow.
Ship there, so
Reset the whole thing.
Yeah.
So my biggest pet peeve, I think if you're working with an advisor, my biggest pet peeve is like, they shouldn't lead with, oh, well, just work 2 years longer. Just spend less in retirement. To me, that's the very last thing you say, because people aren't working with us to go, oh, look, if we just change it from 62 to 78, you're fine. I don't like that. So I had a client, and actually, there was almost no way this was going to happen. And I kept thinking like they're missing something. Like you surely didn't put something in. And so I'm like, okay, got to go to the drawing board here. And we talked about things like variable spending in retirement, maybe downsizing, maybe actually having to move farther away from family to a tax-free state and then just traveling to see them because it was that extreme. We talked about covered calls, right? They're sort of into it. And so I was like, look, you may have to step up and learn a little bit, invest some time here to help make this work. And then we talked about like part-time income, from what they were doing in particular. It was like, hey, there's a little money there. Let's factor that in.
Yeah.
And it turned into this long conversation, but it needed to be, because otherwise there was really no good answer there. So I was just wondering, like, do you ever come across something and you're like, okay, this isn't going to work? What would you do? What's your step there?
Yeah, I think first with a financial plan, I mean, the way we do our financial plans with clients, part of that is making sure that everything's accounted for properly. So I take them, once all the data's in there, I say, let's look at the cash flow, because we want to figure out what your cash flow is. And, it's basically looking at an Excel spreadsheet for anybody that's, maybe doesn't know what I'm talking about.
I love it.
And so you're basically looking at this Excel spreadsheet breakdown of everything, of what your income is, what your expenses are, what your tax liability is, all these different things, to really just make sure that they match. Because sometimes people look and they say, oh, I'm not spending that much.
Yep.
Like, there's no way I'm spending that much, because, and we start to break that down. Or they say, oh, that's not near enough. And those are always like, oh dear, how am I going to adjust this? What are we going to look at? But ultimately it is our job to confront the problem, try to help them solve for their goals, but also being honest about it.
I used to think it was boring. Like, people thought it was boring. I don't want to say boring, but I used to think that the planning side of it, most people thought was rather boring. And so I would gloss over stuff and go, this part's good. You want to talk about it? This part's good. You want to talk about it? And one thing I realized, like this client in particular is 48 years old. So he doesn't think anything is boring. Like, he's into every little thing, because he's like, I am screwed, dude. Tell me I'm not screwed. Like, let's go. And I'm like, okay, we need to look at the tax strategy. We need to look at all this stuff. So it's maybe in my head a little bit that I think people look at this as boring, and maybe some people go, hey, just figure it out, fix it.
Yeah.
Not this guy. And if you're late to saving for retirement, just don't take no for an answer. Like, or don't take working longer, spending less, whatever. Tell whoever you're working with, no, go figure it out. Give me a strategy, right? I'm here for the strategy, not to change an age from one to the other.
Yeah.
So,
you got to go outside the box in
that case,
circumstances.
Yeah.
I mean, some people, it's just like, man, awesome, you can retire. I had a call yesterday with a guy. He said, hey, I reached out to you because I was talking to this other guy who's a client of yours, and they told me, like, you think outside the box. And it's like, he said, I've talked to other advisors and it's always just cut and dry. Oh, well, it's this and it's this. It's this and it's this.
Yep.
And he's like, that's not what I'm looking for. And I was like, my God.
That's like a compliment.
So
right?
yeah, I felt good.
It's we make
I was
kind of
like,
wipe your hair back.
Right?
Yeah. I love it. Hey, go ahead, hit me. You got this joke thing you're gonna work on?
Yeah, I want to know, what do you call an Iraqi father wearing a backpack?
Oh, I like where this is going. What do we got?
Baghdad.
All right. Hey, that wasn't bad because you threw in another nationality.
I
And
try-
a
yeah, you know,
potential
I'm
bomb
trying
scare
to-
from what I.
Oh, gosh. This guy.
I don't really have a joke. I was talking to Kevin. Kevin is our graphic designer over here, and besides Chris, the newest hire. And I was like, "Hey, man, you know, we were talking about eating better," and he goes, "You know, eating vegetables and fruits is supposedly lowers depression." So I was like, "Well, I'm not depressed, you know," but I'm like, "So you tell me, like, if I eat fruits and vegetables, that I will be less depressed?" And he goes, "Yeah, unless you're the one picking them." Because Kevin's, you know, Mexican.
Yeah. Yeah, that's, you know, he is Spanish, so, you know, or
Mexican.
Mexican, so yeah. So
No, it's Mexican.
Yeah,
He's
yeah.
okay.
Yep. I picked fruit. I
He's our border wall buddy.
picked no.
No, you can't
I
say-
picked cantaloupe when they were short people in the field. I would go out when I was younger in high school.
How'd you feel?
It was rough, man.
Depressed.
Yeah, I wasn't depressed, but it was hard work, and I mean, it's. I give credit to the people who do it, and they're definitely underpaid,
I can't speak to that.
oftentimes illegal.
Well, goodbye. Time to wrap it up.
It's just fact.